Alright, I've had some people asking, some people wondering, how is it that I get a discount when I go shop from vendors at these buyer POVs? I got some nice little discounts on cards, like this Lugia right here, Shining Raichu right here, getting all of them at what I would consider under 90%. But part of this is discussing evaluation. Discussing what you would consider these cards or others to even be worth. Some people will go off the idea that the last sale is all that matters. Some people will say the last 3 sales are what matter. Some people say the lowest current listing. How can we use this as the buyer to actually get our evaluation through? Well, the vendor's going to use whatever he would consider the best one for him. I've personally seen vendors that one show will go ahead and say, lowest posted is $50, let's just say, so I want $50 for it. But the next show, they'll say, well, the last 3 sales are for $100, so I don't care that there's a sale or a show. Or same vendor will say $50 one show. Next show he'll see that it was selling for $100, $150, whatever it may be, and lowest listing might be $75. He'll now change it to that higher evaluation, which is the last sale, last 3 sales, whatever. So as the buyer, you should use whichever one sits right with you, whichever one helps you make the most money. So for that example, if the last 3 sales are under that 100 and he's asking 100, start saying, well, last sale was this, or last 3 was this, and average it out, and you have a leg to stand on. I will say, though, most vendors won't really go under 80%. 80 is, in fact, a fantastic deal, as I've gone and discovered. I can actually get 80 on the lower end stuff that's around $50. Let me get you an example, one sec. Items like these are the Bulbasaur from 151. This cute little Mew card. What else we got? We got Charmander here from a little while ago. This Leafeon. All of these, I would say, I got under or around 80%. But we also have to, again, go evaluation. This is something where you have to decide, if you're a seller, what you consider these cards worth. And if you're a buyer, how much do you want to spend? What is a fair price? From the buyer end, I would say you should decide way ahead of time what you consider a fair price, what you consider you want to be willing to spend. And by doing that, you can then, with time, get a nice collection, get stuff together where you will be happy with what you have. That way you are holding on to your money, you're not overly going crazy on the expenditure, and you aren't getting ripped off by some vendors who frankly just want to make as much money as they can off you. Conversely, if you are a buyer, you have to get as much margin as you can. You want to convince these vendors for the items especially that they can't move, that you will take them, you will try to move them. And you have to have the outlet and figure out what outlet you got that you can move these things as best as you can. In our case, we have an eBay store, we have a TCG Player store, and we are soon to be starting our own websites, and we are starting to launch social media efforts like this. So how do you get good deals for both ends? Well, if all you care about is getting the best deal possible, like me, ask. Most vendors will tell you what they're willing to sell. So in one of our last card shows, we obtained literally all of the Charizards. I'm not the craziest Charizard fan, but I love these cards, which is also important, and I will get to. And we got them at a good price. So I have them up for sale. I have them at a high comp, because I know if they sell at the high comp, my 87 or my 80 or whatever percentage I may believe in is going to be good. And then we also have to talk about the importance of walking away from a deal when it doesn't work. This card right here, I nearly walked away from. We have Giratina from Crown Zenith. Beautiful gold card, beautiful, beautiful card. I nearly walked away from this. My buyer was asking $550 for it. Obviously, it's too much, and that's the price I personally want to sell it for, and that's where I can start comping it in my head for what is going to make it work. I convinced them the comp is actually $500 because that's what all the recent sales are. That's what all the recent sales still are upon my looking at this video. And so I work off $500. I try to talk him down from there, get him to $400. He can't do it. Personally, I know this vendor also, which helps and is very important. You do want to get to knowing your vendors, being friends with them, and they start to give you better deals. But as I talk to this guy, we get ourselves down to $450, and I make that deal without hesitation because I have a $100 margin, and I believe I could sell this card either in person or through my website or through eBay/TCG Player if I get a high enough comp, as I said. Other things to consider, cards like Shining Tyranitar here. These things are more so like bedrock in the Pokemon community. Vintage cards move a lot less, have less volatility. So with the Pokemon market going up, generally speaking, these don't follow. But in our current market, it has been, and I've gotten lucky. I obtained this thing, I want to say for around $600. Currently, I think the lowest list is about $800. I'm asking for even more than that because I both love the card and don't want to move it. And that brings me to something else that's very important. Anything you buy, collector, flipper, anything, I genuinely stand by this belief. You should love everything you're buying, or you should love the vast majority of it. My collection here, my Lugia, I've actually had someone just offer me for this today. They offered me at comps $965. I couldn't do it. I know I'm a business owner. I know that I want to move these things as best I can. But for me, this card is really hard to move. I wanted to set a new comp on it if I was going to move it. I'm asking $1,200 for it, but I told him bottom line, $1K, and we just could not make that deal. Shout out to the Box Boy, by the way. This case is beautiful. So, what else? There you got some important questions that you can ask the vendor. One important question is you can ask the vendor, did they grade the card themselves? This gives you more information, gives you the ability to negotiate more because you know his price is actually more negotiable because he started with the raw card price and he has the expansion of whatever the PSA price is now. So all of that is room for him, all of that is profit for him. Some vendors are willing to move on this, some are more community driven than others, some are more business oriented than others. I would say we fall somewhere in the middle. I'm happy to connect people to cards that they love. I've sold off all my Shining Gyarados and my Shining Mewtwo recently, sadly. And for the reason that I sold them, I make an okay profit and I connected it to someone who genuinely loves the card. And for me, that is partially important, at least. I want them to enjoy the card. I want someone who's going to be happy with it. To go with that point, you can just ask them, do you have a lot of room on this? How much room do you have on X card? I was trading the other day with someone for a Suicune right here from Crown Zenith, and they told me they don't have much room. My offer to them apparently was exactly what they paid for. So in this case, the vendor decided to pay literal 100% comp to just hold on to this card. He can't move it because he needs to sell it above comp. And that's where he's at. And that's where I personally can't get there. Another tactic you can use is when you're making a big deal with someone, such as in our last video or with that Charizard lot, you can ask for a bigger discount, generally speaking, than they would normally give because they want the deal. Especially on slabs that they want to move. They want to get this together so they can move it on. They want to have their cash available so they can keep taking deals at 70%. That 30% margin is exactly where they make their profit. Another important thing is just be sure that you can feel comfortable to negotiate. You do not have to take the price that they're asking you. At minimum, you can knock $5, $10 off of it most of the time, even for small little stuff. Like this Steelix here, I paid less than market price for, and I consider it in pristine condition. It's at $18. I believe I paid $10 for it. And there's a bunch of other raw cards in here that I could show you, but in general, Everything's negotiable at these card shows. You should be willing to negotiate. All right, one other very important tip is you should generally do this in cash. You should generally want to use cash because the vendor will be happier with you and make better deals. I've personally gotten $10 swings, $20 swings just because I'm paying in straight cash. Whereas if I was paying with Zelle or Venmo, they would genuinely fight back on it, or they might not be willing to do the deal at all. Especially in Zelle's case, or not Zelle's case, sorry. Especially in Venmo's case, because the US government considers taxing that much harder in the near future. And then in Zelle's case, you're generally safe because it's considered a bank-to-bank transfer, but vendors want to deal in cash. They want the cash in hand too, so they can keep making their deals, like I said earlier. And then we also have to come to the idea of condition. In general, condition is going to be a very important thing when you're doing raw cards. For example, this Ho-Oh right here is something that I have. We argued condition on this when I first got it. The seller of this was trying to argue this was LP. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see anything on this, but this card is definitely not LP. We have some damage on it. We got some other issues with it. We got some of the whitening on the back, which you may be able to see, may not be able to see. But I was able to negotiate down to heavily played, pointing out some of these issues. Here's where we have that damage, in case anyone's curious. We got damage right over here, which you may be able to see or not. Card looks a little mangled, frankly. So I was able to negotiate this down to heavily played. You may be able to argue for this to MBMP, but condition is a very subjective topic also. Some people are going to be okay with the idea of it being MP. Some people are going to be okay with it being heavily played. And in his case, he was okay with calling it LP minus. So in general, you want to negotiate that the condition is lower than the vendor believes it is. You should ask the vendor, what condition did he price at? If you see discrepancies, point out discrepancies and see if they're willing to negotiate with you there. And by doing so, if it's a card you really want, that's going to save you quite a bit of cash. So there's all the stuff I could really advise for you guys to do well at your next card show. I'm not sure when we're going to have our next card show, and hopefully this helps people, and hopefully if people watch this video, they save some money and my tactics don't get sussed out.